And we'll resume with cross-examination of Mr. Lewis by the state. Mr. Liu, when you're ready, you may want to wait a moment. I think everybody's close.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, good morning.
Good morning.
I only have a few more questions
Sure.
for you. Mr. Lewis, in the cases that you worked on or been involved in as a state forensic toxicologist, you've seen people driving around with 2,400 nanograms per milliliter of meth. Is that correct?
Yes.
How often have you seen that?
I couldn't give you a hard number, but probably in the hundreds.
Okay. And you've seen people drive around with even higher numbers than that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you're not saying that anyone with 2,400 nanograms per milliliter or above is going to die, correct?
Correct.
And you're not a medical doctor, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And you're not here to provide any opinion on the cause of Mr. Ellis' death, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Actually, if I can have one more thing.
Sure.
Thank you, Honor.
Mr. Lewis, good morning.
Good morning.
Just had a few questions for you. Mr. Liu asked you questions regarding studies that have been done regarding the ingestion of methamphetamine and methamphetamine her levels, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Right, and those were the studies that were done by, I think, Barry Logan.
Oh, so you're talking about the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration drug fact sheet?
No, these are just articles that Dr. Logan had put together to talk about the ranges of methamphetamine.
Okay.
And you're familiar with those?
I believe so. It's probably part of the pile of papers that I've read that form my education.
Right. And there certainly are those findings where you have these high, like the 9,500 or 9,300 nanograms per milliliters of methamphetamine. Correct.
Yes.
But a couple of those were persons who were arrested or stopped and they ingested it immediately, and that results came. Do you recall that?
I believe some of the case studies could include that.
And those, I would say, are probably, or I would ask, those are probably outliers regarding the ranges that apply to the various levels of methamphetamine that an individual might find himself with.
Possibly, yes.
Now, getting to the actual the meat of the matter, in the median concentration of these toxic levels is much, much less, correct?
Typically.
And in fact, in one of the articles, the median level was 420 nanograms. Correct.
I couldn't give you the hard number, but if that's what's listed in the report.
And in fact, the lab report that you relied upon, the NMS lab,
Yes.
they actually had, and talking about the NMS lab for a bit, this is a laboratory that the Washington State Patrol Toxicology Lab sends for basically for backup assistance when your lab has too much work to do.
Right. So right now, the toxicology lab has a backlog of approximately 1 year or so. So the upper management, anyways, has decided that for most of the coroners and medical examiners cases that they be sent to NMS, as counsel has indicated, as backup.
And this lab is one that's approved by the State Patrol and State Patrol Toxicology Lab to test for substances in a person's blood and or urine.
Yes.
And so the information that comes from NMS lab to be something we could rely upon is informative regarding various levels of known drugs that go in the person's system, correct?
That would be correct.
And in fact, the NMS lab stated that blood levels of 200 to 600 nanograms per milliliter have been reported in methamphetamine abusers who exhibit violent and irrational behavior.
If that's on the report, then I wouldn't necessarily disagree with it.
Right. Well, these are standards. I mean, these are national standards that they're referring to.
I'm not part of that, part of their chain of command, so I wouldn't know.
Well, this is a lab that was relied upon by the state of Washington.
It is.
So there wouldn't be any reason to debate that point.
Not necessarily, no.
And with respect to, just various doses of methamphetamine, except in nominal circumstances, methamphetamine is a toxin, correct?
Well, technically speaking, any compound that you take in could be considered a toxin.
Sure.
The dose makes the poison.
Right, exactly, and a nominal dose, I think it's at 0.05 nanograms per
No.
0.05
Milligram per liter.
milligram per liter, that would be potentially a medicinal dose.
That would probably be considered sort of the upper therapeutic range, but
The upper, and so the lower range would be what?
I believe literature would indicate 0.02 milligram per liter, or since we're bouncing around on units, 0.02 milligram per liter would be the equivalent of 20 nanogram per milliliter.
And so that'd be the lower end of a therapeutic dose?
That'd be consistent with that, yes.
Okay, and so you're not suggesting, in fact, testifying to the jury that the level 2,400 nanograms per milliliter is the therapeutic dose?
That would be inconsistent with what literature would indicate to be a therapeutic dose.
Correct, and in fact, in your opinion, if the person had not used methamphetamine for a couple of months and then ingested a level 2,400 nanograms per milliliter, that'd be a lethal dose, correct?
At least toxic, if not lethal.
If not lethal. And in fact, you told us that in the interview that we had with you sometime. correct?
Yes.
And also, there are side effects, I should say side effects, but there's behaviors that a person may likely exhibit when they are severely intoxicated, correct?
Potential effects, yes.
And those would include delusions,
Possible.
delirium,
Possible.
panic,
Possible.
mania,
Possible again.
profuse sweating.
That would be consistent with how we talked about it increases your metabolic rate, so again, that would be consistent.
And in fact, if you have other physical frailties, such as a cardiovascular situation, this would increase the likelihood of fatality if you had a super high dose of methamphetamine, 2,400 nanograms.
I think at that point you're trying to tie in a physical with what are sort of known effects for the general population. So I think it would be a bit of an overreach without knowing additional information as to, because you're talking about the possibility of a individual having, I believe, cardiovascular issues. So what I can tell you is that methamphetamine, when a person is dosed, does increase a person's heart rate, can increase blood pressure, that type of thing. But is it going to destroy a person's heart based on that dose? I don't know.
Well, I'm not saying that the dose is going to destroy the person's heart, but you suffer from an underlying cardiac type situation.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This goes beyond this witness's expertise. He indicated he's not a medical doctor. We're now getting into cardiovascular systems and opinions related to that.
Well, complete the question. I don't think you had.
Right, thanks. I'm not certain I can remember this. But, Mr. Lewis, with respect to an individual who has cardiac issues, a high level of methamphetamine certainly would not be beneficial to them.
So the issue is expertise. Do you feel like you can opine intelligently on that question?
Again, I can only talk about what the general population, what the effects on the general population would have.
General population with heart conditions?
No, general population of what the drug would do to them, and then again, if the person has underlying heart conditions, I would agree with opposing counsel that is probably out of my scope.
Objection sustained.
Fair enough. But nonetheless, the level of 2,400 nanograms per milliliter is not something that would be a medicinal type use.
Again, that would be inconsistent with medicinal use.
Correct. And also, just so we were clear, the various manners in which to ingest methamphetamine, it's really swallow or eat it, correct?
Yeah.
It can
Yes.
be injected intravenously,
It can.
and it can be swallowed.
Correct.
Excuse me. Mr. Lewis, thank you very much. That's all the questions.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Lewis, just a couple quick questions.
Certainly.
So, you work for the state of Washington, of course,
Correct.
and you're paid by the state of Washington.
Correct.
And your office, the state toxicology lab, is represented by the Attorney General's office, is that right? Let me rephrase it. So when we did our interview of you on August 25th, that we worked through the Attorney General's office to set that up. Does that sound right?
Sounds correct. Although for future reference, you can call us directly.
Okay, well, good to know. When we did the interview on August 25th, there were a few of the defense attorneys and then 3 representatives of the state of Washington were also there, right? Mr. Liu, Ms. Eakes, and Ms. Nicolavo. That sound right?
I didn't get all the names, but the chief counsel currently, for sure.
Okay, and that section of your interview, which Mr. Kurtzer just referenced, where you told us that if a person hadn't used methamphetamine for several months and then took a 2,400 nanogram dose per milliliter, that it would likely be a fatal outcome, correct?
Correct.
You didn't say anything about it being possibly toxic. You just said fatal, right?
I believe so.
Okay. And since then, you talked with the Attorney General's office, right?
Correct.
And there was a moment last week after your testimony where Mr. Conrad tried to talk to you when you were talking with those attorneys. Do you remember that?
I was talking to both sides a lot last week.
Do you remember Mr. Conrad asking if he could talk to you and Ms. Eakes told him no?
I don't
Overruled.
remember. Sorry.
You may answer.
Not in a particular circumstance.
Okay. Do you remember telling Mr. Conrad that you didn't want to get in trouble with the AG's office?
In trouble at the AG's office?
I'm just asking if you remember.
I don't report directly to the AG's office, so I don't know how I get in trouble with them.
Okay. All right. And just, you mentioned here a moment ago that there have been instances of someone driving, getting pulled over, and having a methamphetamine level of 2,400 nanograms per milliliter.
Correct.
And in those cases, based on your professional opinion, it would be unlikely that those people had been abstinent from using methamphetamine for a period of time, correct?
Correct. Again, when we talked about tolerance, so someone with a dose similar to that, I would expect that person to have been using on a fairly regular basis.
Okay, right. And the people, and you actually testified last week, I just want to recall, that of the death cases you've seen due to methamphetamine overdose, the 2,400 is actually the highest you've ever seen, correct?
I've seen. I would say that I've seen individuals that had lower doses.
A
That
lot of people died when they had a lower amount.
correct.
Okay, all right. Thanks. Done for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Conrad.
No regret, Your Honor.
Mr. Liu?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Bertrand?
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, you are excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Your next witness.
Your Honor, that's called Matt Gomes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Collins, please come forward right about here and raise your right hand to be sworn. Somebody swear or affirm that your testimony in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you very much. Please have a seat right here. Please state your name and please spell your name.
My name is Matthew Collins, MATTHEWCOLLINS.
When you're ready, Mr. Osler.
Good morning, Mr. Gomes.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm all right.
Are you married?
Yes, sir.
How long have you been
Almost 15 years.
Have kids?
4 kids.
What are the ages of your kids?
My daughter just turned 12 this weekend, and then the boys are 10, 6, and 3.
All right, so if your youngest son is 3, was he born at the time of this incident?
He was a few months old. He was born January 12th of 2020.
And did you grow up around here?
No, my dad was in the military, so I moved every couple of years of my life, pretty much.
And go to college around here?
I did. Well, I went to the University of Oregon.
Sorry about that. When did you go to the University of Oregon?
01 to 06.
And so when you said you moved around, can you tell us just from a 3,000-foot view what that looked like? Where did you move around to and how long?
Yeah, so I was born in Germany on a military base there. We lived in Central America, in Panama, after the U.S. went in there, and Fayetteville, North Carolina, Arizona, kind of all over. We moved about every 2 to 3 years.
How did you end up either at the University of Oregon or up here in Washington, whichever was first?
So my mom's from Roseburg, and my parents met at Oregon State. So when my dad got out of the military and retired, they ended up back in Oregon. And yeah,
Did you graduate high school in Oregon then?
I did.
Okay. And then to the University of Oregon?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point did you enter the military?
I did.
Can you tell us when in this timeline we're talking about you entered the military?
So in the summer of 2006, September 11th, I enlisted in the military.
So that would have been after University of Oregon?
Yes, I graduated in August of 2006 using summer school, and then a month later I was enlisted in the military.
Why did you enlist in the military?
In my freshman year in college, my dad, I'll never forget, gave me a call and told me to turn the TV on, and I turned it on to watch the planes going to the towers.
Sustained.
Did you enter the military after 9/11?
I did.
Okay. And when you enrolled in the military, what was your assignment?
And I'm going to check the relevance of this.
This assignment in the military. I'm just going to go to it.
I'll allow this briefly, if we don't go into too much detail.
Sorry, what was that, Judge?
I'll allow this briefly if we don't bog down in too much detail on this.
Yeah, so I was an infantryman in 2nd Ranger Battalion.
What's that?
So we're a special operations unit, and we're kind of, I don't know, one of the frontline infantry units for the military. One of the frontline infantry units for the military.
As part of your training, did you receive training in hand-to-hand combat and or grappling or dealing with combative opponents?
Yes, sir, I did.
Describe that for us.
Well, it was kind of a daily, as a ranger, you're either training with firearms or you're training with your hands. But, I mean, it was something we did every day.
And how long did you serve in the military before you moved on?
Just under 8 years.
And once you completed that 8 years, what was your next employment?
So right away I got out and I started working construction. I was working for a framing company, building schools here in Washington, and then eventually got hired on by Tacoma Police.
Why Tacoma Police? Is that where you applied or is that where you wanted to work?
That's where I applied. But my wife and I had, we'd gotten out of the military and we'd bought a home in Tacoma, and we loved Tacoma, so that's where we wanted to stay and raise our family.
All right. Why did you decide to become a cop?
I mean, I think from the time that I was little, I had a heart for kind of bullied kids, weak people who can't protect themselves. And so I just always had that in my system, and a police officer is a direct representation of that. So that's...
Did your experience in the military lend itself to becoming becoming a police officer?
Absolutely, it did. Well, I mean, for a police officer, you really want people who've dealt with a lot of high stress, dangerous situations, because when you go out into the public and you face these things, you want people who can think through situations and be calm and make rational decisions. And there's no way to give someone that kind of experience that you learn real world when your life is on the line. It's irreplaceable to actual experience. So I think that there's nothing better for police officers to have but military experience.
And so when did you become a police officer?
In 2015, I think it was June 15th, 2015 is when I was hired.
And did you go through, we've heard a lot about basic law enforcement and the training and all the stuff in order to become a police officer. I assume you went through all that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and was that in 2015 as well?
It was.
Okay. We heard some information from Officer Ford about kind of your reputation. Were you the president of your class?
I was.
What does that mean?
It just means you help control the class on a leadership level. You make sure everybody gets to the right place, the right time, has all their gear, and you just you're a middleman between the instructors and the class.
How many? I guess I'll call them cadets are in that class.
I don't remember. I think it was somewhere around 50, but I'm not totally sure.
And we heard some information, at least, that you were involved as a defensive tactics instructor.
I was.
When did you become involved in that?
I think that was around, I'm not totally sure, but I think it was around 2017, something like that.
And can you tell the jury what a defensive tactics instructor is?
Yeah, so defensive tactics is just kind of what we call our hand-to-hand training at Tacoma. Largely what we do is we teach, cuffing, dealing with violent subjects, and we put officers, we create situational arenas for officers, and then we make them go in there and make decisions, and we kind of grade them, judge them on that, and help them progress.
And what was your role as an instructor? Did you actually train these folks?
Cuffing is the same in high risk as it is in non-compliant. It's the same motions. So basically there's two kinds when it comes to technique: non-compliant and compliant cuffing. So that was a big thing. I mean, you heard Sergeant Nielsen say that at the academy you train that thousands of times, because a large part of the job, the whole part of the job, is getting people in handcuffs so that we can then deal with the rest of the situation after. But we're only there because somebody needs to go in handcuffs usually.
Okay. And how long were you a defense tactics instructor?
I think I said since 2017, so whenever, 3 years.
Right. And does part of that include training on how to control a subject prior to the application of the handcuffs?
Yes, it does.
And what's the distinction between those two? Because we've talked about control and we've talked about restraint. Are those the same things?
So, I guess control and restraint could be considered the same things, but so from the moment, obviously best case scenario is we just, hand someone our handcuffs and they put the handcuffs on. I mean, we don't want to do any of that, but obviously people don't want to go to jail and they don't want to deal with the police. So it starts with very soft tactics where you're just like talking to them and you're like, hey, look, you're going to jail today, put your hands behind your back, and people will usually comply, and you put their hands behind their back, and there's kind of an easy, low use of force cuffing that happens. Then that progresses and progresses as resistance progresses, and what I was taught and what normally is taught is that putting them on the ground is a necessary, because up on your feet it's very dynamic. People are very dynamic. We have lots of weapons on ourselves. We don't know what that person has that we're contacting. So the safest thing is to take them off their feet on the ground, and now I can start to manipulate the arms and then the hands to get into handcuffs, and you kind of break things down in that manner. So that's the way in which I taught from.
Okay, and so in circumstances where there is resistance from the subject to being placed in handcuffs, do you have to control body and their hands and arms first.
Oh, 100%.
What happens if you don't?
Well, you can't get the handcuffs on. It's impossible.
We've heard a lot about placement of knees and pressure on individuals who are in the prone position. Is that part of the control tactics training that you taught at Tacoma Police Department?
Absolutely.
Is it necessary at times to place knees or weight on a prone individual in order to gain control and cuff them?
Not only is it necessary, I think it's the only thing that you can do.
What do you mean by that?
Well, again, it's very difficult to get someone, no matter what their size, into handcuffs. And especially when you start talking about people on strong drugs where their strength increases and they're not feeling pain and they're not listening to normal commands, it's a very difficult thing to do. So I think your question is why specifically knee on the back?
Yeah.
So again, you've got to isolate their arm. So the more the person can move, if I can move my feet, if I can move my hips, if I have a lot of mobility, it's very difficult to take you, because as soon as I grab your arm, you're just turning and facing me, and we're just going to dance in the street. So I have to start manipulating your body, get you down on the ground, get you flat. Now I can take your feet out of the game, and I'm just dealing with your upper body. Then I put my knee across the back, and now I isolate the upper body, and I can just work on the arm. So you kind of, again, piece by piece, you're breaking it down.
All right. And kind of the process that you've talked about in the training that you've discussed, implementing at TPD, do you use that on a daily basis when you're on patrol?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So let's talk about patrol then. What were your duties at Tacoma Police Department following your hire in 2015?
Well, I was a defensive tactics instructor. I was a firearms instructor. I was on the SWAT team. And I was a shield instructor, which was a new tool that we had received. But most of my duties were patrol. So Officer Burbank and I worked together in what we call the 4 sector, which is the east side of Tacoma. And we worked graveyard shifts, so we started at 8 p.m. at night, and if everything went well, you finished at 6 in the morning. And, you know, basically you show up and there's a list of calls that have been pending from swing shift, and you pick up what you can, answer the calls, and then if you have time, when there was always a time at graveyard about midnight when things died down with calls, and then we would kind of go to the high crime areas and drive around so that if there was a crime happening, we could be right there.
You talked about being a partner with Officer Burbank. Were you and Officer Burbank partners from the time that you were hired at TPD, or was it sometime after 2015?
No, most officers in Tacoma work as single officer cars, especially new officers. So I worked as a solo officer for quite a while, and then when I got transferred, I was in the 3 sector, which is the southwest portion of Tacoma that goes all the way to Lakewood. When I worked in the 3 sector, I was a solo officer, and then came and worked with Officer Burbank in the 4.
Can you estimate when that would have been, year-wise, for years?
He's a lot better with dates than I am, but I think it was,
Let me ask it a different way. How long were you partners with Officer Burbank?
I think it was about 3 years. Yeah.
And you described, I think you said the 4 sector.
Yes.
Were you always partners with Officer Burbank on the 4 sector?
For the most part, he was a training officer as well. So there was, whenever we'd get new people, they would send him to train them, and then I would ride solo or ride with one of my other squad mates. But for the most part, we were always together.
Okay. And for us regular folks, what's the 4 sector like?
Well, it is the highest crime area of Tacoma.
And what are when we say 4 sector, are there geographical boundaries of that?
Yeah, so the 4 sector, and it's been over 3 years, so it goes, basically our western boundary is Hosmer, and then it will go all the way to the county out to Portland, and it kind of goes out a little bit east of Portland, but that's mostly county territory. And then Portland Avenue, yes sir. And then the southern border is 96th, where we were on in this incident, and then county kind of is below us on 96. There's a few areas where we kind of dip down, but for the most part, that's the bound. And then 38th on the north end.
And I think you've described it as a high crime kind of sector. Tell us what you mean by high crime and what kind of crime.
Well, I mean, first of all, Hosmer Street was crazy when we were there. I mean, there's anything you can think of. There's a lot of shootings, prostitution, drugs is rampant in not just in the 4th sector, but everywhere in Tacoma, as people know who are from here. But I mean, domestic violence is probably the number one call we go to. A lot of times, unfortunately, drugs are involved in that as well. But I mean, gosh, we had carjackings. We constantly had stolen vehicles all the time. I mean, and you name it.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Was that more prevalent during your shift or during the day shift?
I think every shift kind of had its own thing. But there's definitely a nightlife in Tacoma that there's a whole other world that happens after hours. So it was its own thing for sure.
And Officer Combs, can you describe for the jury your experience dealing as a patrol officer with individuals who are suffering from mental health issues? Is that a regular thing? If so, what does that look like?
It is a regular thing. I mean, unfortunately, you know, I mean, almost every night we get a call. For instance, like we have a transient male in the 7-Eleven. He's kicking over all the stands and throwing things at the employees. So we show up, and again, that, you know, is this person experiencing a mental health crisis? Probably, maybe. But our job, again, first is we got to get them in handcuffs because there's other people in the store a lot of the time. You got whatever, mom with her kids in the back. You've got the employees who are scared. They called us because they were scared. So first thing is get them contained, and then we have resources after that to help people. But first thing is get them in cuffs.
And we heard from both Mr. Ryan and Mr. Nielsen that a patrol officer in that situation or any of these situations has to first control the scene to make it safe. Is that your training?
Absolutely, absolutely.
For the reasons you just discussed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How about, I think I know the answer to this, but describe for the jury the frequency with which you would deal with individuals who are high on illegal drugs during the course of your patrol.
Constantly. All night.
And does the fact that a subject is suffering from mental health and or high on illegal drugs affect how you deal with the individual when you come into contact with them?
I mean, it does once we can make it safe. Absolutely. Once we can, because another aspect to both mental health and drugs is, and a big thing about this is people don't think clearly. So you're not making good decisions. You're not thinking about your future. You're not thinking about going to jail. So the first thing we've got to do is stop you from hurting yourself, hurting someone in the community, or us, right? So we got to get you in handcuffs. So that's number one always.
And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a daily occurrence on patrol, dealing with those sorts of individuals.
Absolutely.
On a day-to-day basis.
Yes, sir.
Have you been recognized for your dealing with those sorts of folks during the course of your employment at TPD?
I'm going to object to relevance.
Sustained.
Well, did you receive the Medal of Merit?
I did.
Your Honor, same objection. Relevance. Move to strike.
Jury will disregard the question of counsel.
Ever been disciplined for use of force violations?
Never once.
And I'm going to object. Relevance.
Sustained.
Officer Collins, has the death of Manuel Ellis affected you?
Absolutely.
Officer.
I'm going to object on relevance.
Overruled, you may answer.
How has the death of a sudden community contact affected you, Officer Collins?
I mean, for police officers, it's the worst thing that can happen. I mean, in this case, undoubtedly, Manny was in the wrong. But at the end of the day, his mother lost a child, and his sister lost a brother, and that human life is a precious thing. And so, obviously, it's a weight we bear as police officers when we go out and we step into this stuff every single night. But it's the worst possible outcome.
Well, let's talk about what happened leading up to your contact with Mr. Ellis. Do you remember being on patrol with Officer Burbank around 11 o'clock on March 3rd of 2020?
I do.
And tell the jury where you were on patrol that evening.
Well, again, we were kind of floating around 96th Street, and I think we were headed to Hosmer in the first place, and we did a traffic stop at 96 and A, I believe.
All right. And do you recall that traffic stop at 96 and Ainsworth?
Vaguely, I remember it was two black females who had
I'm sorry.
A Adam. Two black females with warrants, I believe, but they had their car. They had like headlight out. There's the windshield was all shattered, so it was, yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to show you with the court's permission what's been marked as State's Exhibit 13. Is that okay, Judge? Do you recognize States 13?
I do.
What's States 13?
It's a CAD printout from that traffic stop.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some specific information about that traffic stop. And if you need to refer to that to refresh your memory for anything, just let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right. You indicated that you thought there were two African-American females in that car.
Yes.
Is that independent recollection, or how do you know that?
That is independent recollection. I'm not sure if it's in here or not.
Okay. All right. Do you know what time you contacted that vehicle?
So it looks like we called it out at 23:15, 59 seconds.
All right. Let's be clear about what that means. When you say we called out, what is that? What is a call out in this context?
So it can change a little bit, specifically how it works, but a lot of times it's just, if so we rode a partner car, so if one of us saw a traffic stop, then you'd pick up the mic, and you're calling, hey, we're going to be on traffic, 96 and A, here's the plate. And so then they'll send it to your computer screen. You're actually dispatched at that time, but you can call it before they send you.
Why don't you tell the jury, because I assume most of us don't know, but do you have what's called an MDT in your car?
I do.
What's an MDT?
The computer.
Okay, the mobile data?
Mobile, yeah.
Okay, so when you say you call it out, do you do that with a radio on the computer?
Again, you can change it. You can actually do it from the computer. You can just click traffic stop and put in the information, but I'm pretty sure we usually always called it out on the radio.
All right. Any independent recollection on how you or Officer Burbank called it out on the contact before you came into contact with Mr. Ellis?
I think I just called it on the car mic and just picked it up and called.
All right, let's talk about that. Is there a microphone in the car?
There is.
What does that look like, and where is it located?
So I think you might have seen it in the pictures. It's just right there on the center console. It's just a hand mic that has a little clicker on it.
So on one of the exhibits that we saw, I saw maybe it was a yellow colored, kind of looked like a walkie-talkie or something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay. And is that mounted in the vehicle?
It's got like a magnet mount on it. It just sticks on the center console.
Okay. And so, for instance, if you were to call in this A Street contact, you would pick that up and say what?
Just say Henry 317 traffic 96 in Ainsworth. Here's the vehicle, or 96 in A. Excuse me, A Adam.
And so you contact this vehicle on 96 and A. Describe that contact for us if you recall.
It was pretty fast. I remember we approached the vehicle and the driver was immediately in tears and said she had warrants and she couldn't take care of it. But she told us a story about what she was doing to take care of it, and she wasn't driving her vehicle; it was someone else's. So we just told them, "Have a good night. Take care of your warrants."
And was that vehicle registered with Mr. Bogan's?
I believe it was from you having me look at this.
Would that refresh your memory by looking at the CAD report?
Yeah, I see it right here.
And so in the CAD report, do either you or Officer Burbank indicate who the registered vehicle was registered to so that dispatch knows that information?
Well, when you run the plate, when you run someone's license plate, a DMV registration pops up on your screen. So it shows registered owner, it shows warrants involved in the vehicle, anything.
And we heard from Officer Ford that Officer Ford and Officer Rankine drove by during the course of this stop. Do you remember that happening?
Yes.
Okay, and did they actually stop and participate, or did they just drive by?
I feel like they just, if I remember right, they just drove up and we kind of gave them the thumbs up, like we're good.
Everything's okay? All right. How long would you estimate you're at that traffic contact with the lady in Mr. Bogan's car?
Not long. It was pretty quick.
Well, we heard from Grant Fredericks, I think maybe the first day of this trial, about an entry in the CAD report about when that was cleared.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Mr. Fredericks talking about that?
I do, absolutely.
Objective of that it's leading.
It's foundational, I'll allow it. You can go ahead.
And look in the CAD report, when was that stop cleared?
23, 19, and 48 seconds.
All right. And there was some discussion from Mr. Fredericks about a minute and 12 seconds from the time that was cleared to the time the Vivint camera activated. Do you remember him testifying about that?
I do.
Why don't you tell the jury what the clearing process is when you contact somebody before it's entered into the CAD?
Yeah, so when we, in the 4 sector, at least I can speak for, when we did traffic stops, the common practice how we did it was, because you got to think, you're getting out possibly in a high crime area and you're doing a traffic stop. So now people are seeing where you're at, people are walking by your car, and whenever we're done, if we can, we leave immediately and we clear away from the scene. Nobody gets back in their car and starts typing because you can be a target at that point.
Well, how does the clearing entry get into the CAD?
So again, you can, like if we had to get out of the car really quick, we could just call it and say, hey, we're clear from the traffic, now we're on this. Or you can clear it just by clicking a button on your computer in the car.
All right. And so what was your practice, you and Officer Burbank's practice, when clearing a call in this high crime area?
So immediately we get out of the area. We'd start driving, and then whoever was the passenger would enter notes, enter, wants and warrants or whatever, and then put a disposition of how we cleared it.
And was that Officer Burbank in this case?
It was. He was the passenger, yeah.
And where did you guys drive to for Officer Burbank to enter that information in the computer?
Well, I was just heading to Hosmer Street from the stop. That was our destination from the beginning. So he was still clearing as we encountered Mr. Ellis.
And when you say still clearing, is he on the MDT at that time?
Yeah, he's typing on the computer.
So when it says cleared at what time again?
It says closing time 23:19 and 48 seconds.
So is Officer Burbank doing that if you're sitting at the red light at 96 Ainsworth?
Yes.
So the minute and 12 seconds that Mr. Fredericks talked about is occurring while you're at that stoplight?
Correct.
I'm going to object. This is leading and argumentative.
I will sustain that.
Just so I'm clear, was it cleared at the time that it has there at the stoplight?
It was.
All right, before we get to what happened once you're sitting at that stoplight, are you trained on dealing with individuals who exhibit symptomology of what is labeled as excited delirium?
I had a class during the academy on it.
And what are the symptoms associated with an individual who may have, I guess they call it agitated delirium now, but that symptomology?
Right. Yeah, so I guess the accepted term now is agitated or aggravated delirium, excited. But so essentially it always involves drugs. It involves delusions, extreme strength, a lot of high body temperature, rapid heart rate, and then sudden death.
And is your training that can turn into a medical crisis?
Oh, yeah.
And are there things that you're supposed to do once you restrain or control somebody who's exhibiting those things?
Yes.
What?
Best practice is to, well, obviously, best would be not to restrain them. If we could have them just sit there and be calm, that would be ideal. But to just limit the amount of pressure you're putting on them as much as reasonable, and to get them medical aid
As soon as possible.
as soon as possible, yeah.
And why is that?
Well, I think that there's a lot with, like, you can tell from the last descriptor of it, sudden death, there's a lot of question marks with it. And the best practice that I've heard of, I guess, that works is when the fire department can administer ketamine to calm that person's heart rate down, because their heart is just spiking out of control.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute as well. Do you actually have experience, practical experience, dealing with people who are exhibiting the same symptomology that you just described?
Once.
Tell us about that.
So I referenced that in my interview with Pierce County deputies, but that happened. So there was a night that Officer Burbank and I got asked to work in the 1 sector, which is downtown, which is where we are right now. There was people sick or something, and they needed a 2-officer car to come up. So we came up here, and we got a call from the St. James Apartments, which is right next to the jail, right up here on Yakima. And it was a single elderly lady, lived in this apartment, and she called just terrified because in those apartments, they're old school apartments, and they have on the floor, there's like a brass box that you can open. That's the mailman. You can put the mail in there, close it, and the person inside their apartment can open it up, grab the mail. Well, this guy she heard someone trying to get into her house or into her apartment. She calls us, and she looks out the peephole. She can see his feet dangling out of that little box, and he's trying to break through her side. So she locks herself in the bathroom, calls the police, gets us there.
Did you have contact with this individual?
We did.
And did this individual exhibit the symptomology that you described associated with excited delirium?
He did.
Tell us what happened.
Well, as soon as we got there, she said that the apartment across the hallway from hers was vacant, and that when he couldn't get in and heard her on the phone, and she told him, "I'm calling the police," he kicks the door and goes in that vacant apartment.
Did you contact him?
We did.
Tell us what happened.
So we opened the door, and it was an empty, dark apartment, and he was sitting in the back against the window, and I'll never forget because he was sucking on one of those suckers that has like a scorpion in the sucker, and he was just sitting there, and I could see from the light from the window behind him, I could see it, and he was just looking at us, sucking on this sucker.
And did you attempt to arrest this individual?
We did. We said, "Hey man, you're trespassing, come on out here, you're under arrest."
And so tell us about your experience trying to arrest an individual exhibiting the symptomology associated with excited delirium.
So to get to the point of this, eventually it progressed. It was like a 6-minute fight. I think other officers, luckily the lady who called had heard us fighting, and she called 911 again and said, "Hey, I think these cops are in trouble. You need to get people here," because we couldn't get to our radios again. But it was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. But the strength that this guy had, he was very small. He was probably 150 pounds, kind of skinny. But he was whispering to us the whole time that he was going to kill us. And he was throwing me around with all my body weight on one arm, and he was slamming me into the wall and throwing me around. And at one point, I kneed him in his groin as hard as I possibly could, and he started laughing.
And so, were you able to restrain or control this individual?
Eventually, we were.
Okay. And that experience, does that inform you on how you would move or deal with those types of individuals moving forward?
Yes. So, one of the things that, again, why you want experienced cops come into a situation that you're involved in is you kind of, as an officer, you create this Rolodex of all these experiences that you're collecting along the way. And I remember that when I went back through and I was thinking about it because, we were, again, it was confusing because this guy is unarmed, but he's going for our guns the entire time. He's trying to reach for our sidearms. And I'm starting to, nothing's working. And I remember when I need him and that happened, I started thinking, I'm going to have to shoot this guy. And obviously, again, that's the last thing in the world we want to do. And so, as I thought about it, I realized that an LVNR is the best thing for these people because they're not. You don't feel pain when you're under this kind of. You're not. It's not rational. You're not. You know, you get hit. It's not a rational reaction like you would have. You don't feel pain. You don't feel yourself getting tired, so you can keep going and going and going. And you're extremely strong. So this guy, I delivered multiple strikes. It's like, how many do I just keep striking him, keep striking him, keep striking him forever? Like it's, I'm just going to hurt him, injure him. The best way is to cut off that blood flow temporarily, make him unconscious, get him in handcuffs. Again, restrain him.
When you say this guy, we're still talking about the individual
At the St. James Apartments, yes.
And so that it sounds like, did that experience inform you on how to deal with similarly situated individuals moving forward?
Directly, yes.
And you discussed an LVNR. Is that the lateral vascular neck restraint?
Yes, sir.
All right, we heard a lot about that. What is that?
So again, the LVNR, it's a move that's done where, so you have to be facing the same direction as someone, and then you use your forearm to cut off one carotid and your bicep to cut off the other carotid, and you temporarily stop the blood. You heard testimony that, I think it was Dr. Mitchell, who said it cuts off the jugulars and attacks oxygen. So the jugulars are veins. They're moving deoxygenated blood away from your brain. The carotids are pumping oxygenated blood up. So you stop the carotids and there's no oxygen, because to attack oxygen is foolish, because you know, I knew guys who could hold their breath for over 6 minutes that I work with in the military. So what am I going to, you don't attack oxygen. But, and also you create damage, you damage their throat, the muscles in their neck. So again, it pinpoints on those carotids, stops that blood, causes unconsciousness, and then the blood immediately returns once you stop.
So we heard Officer Nielsen indicated it took 7 to 9 seconds with an appropriate application. Is that your training as well?
Yes, that sounds right.
And he said it would result in a 15 to 20 second period of unconsciousness. Is that your training as well?
That sounds correct.
So Jack Ryan suggested to this jury that you had to get some sort of certification to use this. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
I know that there is some departments that do this, but again, that's the kind of thing that happens within government that is actually detrimental, because what they do is LVNR is a company, and so they trademark this, and then they come in, and then they work with departments and say, these guys need to get certified. And then so then if you want to get certified, basically you go to like a 2-hour course. The guy says, this is what it is, here's how you do it, you practice it, now you're certified. For me, I've been grappling for almost 20 years at this point, so this was just...
Well, let's talk about that. Is that something that you learned as part of your grappling experience?
Oh, yeah.
So tell us about your grappling experience. I know you talked about hand-to-hand combat in the military. When you're saying grappling, is that something that's different than that or built off of that? Tell us what you mean by your 20 years experience.
So, after high school, I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submission wrestling. So the reason people kind of call it grappling is it's not wrestling for a pin. It's grappling usually to either a joint lock or a submission.
Okay. And you said you've been doing that for 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
Competitively?
Yes.
When I say competitively, what does that mean to you?
Well, I started doing tournaments when I was young, and then again in the military, we did tournaments kind of within the military and within the 3 Ranger battalions, and so I ended up coaching our competitive team.
And we heard Mr. Nielsen say that you seem proficient in ground control grappling. Is that based on your grappling training or something else?
Yeah, I did it. I mean, that was my pastime. So
with respect to the LVNR, when did you first learn the appropriate application of that?
So that's one of the very first things that the school I went to taught. It's kind of like the base move that was taught.
Okay. And how many times do you think you applied that or participated in practicing application of that?
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Okay. Well, you're going to talk about that in a minute, because I think you described the appropriate position of your body relative to the person you're applying it to. What's the significance of the position of your body relative to that subject?
Yeah, so if you're not, behind someone, if you start to get to the side, now you can block one carotid, but not the second. So without two, if you have one supplying blood, there's no choke there.
No benefit from that?
No benefit, yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second, okay? All right, so you're at 96th and Ainsworth, and Officer Burbank is entering the information in the MDT. What, if anything, is your attention drawn to?
So in the northbound lane on Ainsworth, there was a sedan that was trying to turn left, and I saw who I now know as Mr. Ellis at the passenger door trying to work the passenger door open.
Okay. And so are you stopped in the lane of travel at the red light going, I guess,
West.
Through the intersection?
Yes, sir.
All right. So would the other lane of travel had a green light at that point in time?
So the turning traffic off of Ainsworth would have a green light, yes.
Okay. So you're sitting there, and you see Mr. Ellis in the intersection. What's going through your mind at that point?
So as I stated in my statement, I'm trying to figure this out. So one thing to understand is on the east side in Tacoma, this was not that crazy of a thing. I mean, there's stuff happening all the time in the street, everywhere, really. But I didn't know, was this a domestic violence thing where someone got kicked out of a car? Is this guy trying to get a ride? Is this, who knows, carjacking? Could be anything.
Okay. And so as you're seeing this transpire, are you contemplating contacting Mr. Ellis? What's appropriate response from you at that point in time?
Yeah, so I'm immediately trying to develop what we have here. I remember I picked up the mic and I'm watching this, and then as I'm trying to figure it out, the car just takes off westbound.
Okay. And can you describe that car for us?
I believe from my description it was like a gray or silver sedan, kind of like a Chrysler 300 Charger type body.
Okay. And what, if anything, did Mr. Ellis do once that car turned left on headed west?
He just kind of stayed standing there in the middle of the intersection.
And what's your thought process at that point in time?
Well, now I got a guy standing in the middle of an intersection who was involved in something, but now he's just standing there, and he's right in the middle of a green light where cars are moving north to west.
Okay. And so what, if any, action do you take at that point in time?
So then I rolled down my window and said, "Hey, man, what are you doing?"
How far away are you from Mr. Ellis when you do that?
I don't know, maybe 50 feet or something like that.
And tell the jury, what, if any, observations do you make about his person? Meaning, do you recall what he's wearing, if he has any objects in his hands, those sorts of things?
I don't recall what he was wearing, but I do know he had a bag, like a grocery bag in his hand.
Okay. And so you, forgive me, I didn't catch what you said. What did you say to him?
I said something to the effect of, like, "Hey, man, what are you doing? Come here."
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was Mr. Ellis's response?
He just immediately started jogging over to the car.
Are you still at the stop bar at the intersection?
Yes.
Had the light turned green at this point?
I don't know. I was just stayed focused on him, so, yeah.
Are you still in the driver's seat of the patrol car?
Yes.
Okay, so describe Mr. Ellis' interaction with you as he comes up to the vehicle.
Yeah, so then he comes strangely close to the vehicle, like not an average distance. He kind of is right up on it. And so I backed up and was like, "Whoa, what's going on?"
Okay. And can you describe for the jury Mr. Ellis' appearance when he was that close to you?
Yeah, so I immediately knew something was wrong. His eyes were super wide and he was like sweating profusely, and it was a cold night.
Okay. March 3rd, 2020, do you remember approximately what the temperature was?
I don't, but I was wearing my beanie at the time, and I never wore that unless, it was really cold. So.
All right, so Mr. Ellis gets up close to you, and what happens once he's in that location at the driver's side of the patrol vehicle?
Yeah, so then he gets up to the patrol vehicle, the window, and he says something like, "I got to talk. I'm having a bad night. I got warrants."
Okay.
And I said, "All right, man, calm down. Go sit on the sidewalk, and we'll call this out."
Okay, and at time? What's your process? What are you thinking you're dealing with, and what is your next step?
So I was going to call it out that we had a subject that said he had warrants, and we were going to check on wants and warrants, because that doesn't always mean that. I mean, we've regularly gotten people who said that. We run them. They have no warrants, and they're like, look, man, I'm just cold. I just need some food. And they just say something like that to us. So we still have to investigate, see what's going on. So I was going to pull into that driveway that you see that's kind of just north of where we're at.
Okay. Why'd you ask him to go sit on the curb or go to the curb?
Well, he's in the middle of the road at this point, and, you know, I'm super uncomfortable because he's right up on my window, and it just didn't seem right.
All right. And why, you said that you had planned to pull into that driveway that we see at the intersection in the photographs. Why would you do that as opposed to just stay where you are or pull off into the bike lane?
Well, because we can't obstruct traffic. You know, we got to get out of the way of normal people getting to work and doing their thing, and there's no reason to be out there in the middle of the street and put ourselves in danger if we don't have to.
Would you ever make a contact in the middle of the lane of travel at the stop bar?
Not if we didn't have to.
Okay, so you said you were about to call it in. Why did you call it in?
Yeah, so part of calling stuff in is it's not only you need to be accurate for dispatch, but like for us on the east side, it's really important because we have all of other cops kind of floating around, and when they hear us call something out, it tells them, do I need to go there or are they fine? Can I just do my own thing? And so I'm trying to get an accurate description of what's going on. So at first I see Manny at the car. I've kind of already explained the process I'm going through. I'm like, what is this? Is this a DV? Does he know these people? Is this a random person? Then that person takes off, so now I have no victim. Now I have a guy sitting in the street. So I call him over, and if he just ran away at that point, we would have just kept driving. We didn't really have anything. But he comes to us. Now he looks to be under the influence of narcotics, sweating profusely. His eyes are really wide, and he's saying he has warrants. So now I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to call out. We got a guy. We're going to check wants and warrants. So now I've kind of moved on to another thought process. But then, when he started walking around the car, I immediately knew we were in trouble.
Well, let me slow you down. So you didn't call that in immediately?
No.
Why not?
Again, I mean, I'm trying to put out an accurate description of what's going on, and this situation has just changed multiple times within a very short distance. So I'm trying to be accurate.
And so you said something seemed off when he got around to the front of the vehicle. Tell the jury what happened.
Yeah, so as soon as he started walking around, because I told him to go to the sidewalk and get off the road, and if you remember from the pictures, it's quite a distance. I mean, there's a space between us and the bike lane, then there's the bike lane, then there's a sidewalk. And as soon as he starts walking around, he just fixates on Officer Burbank and the way he's looking. Part of being a police officer, we read people's body language and their eyes for a living. That's what we do, because one minute I can be talking to a person who just is having a bad day and you stopped on traffic, or someone who's trying to kill us. The range is huge. So you get really quick on picking up on cues. His body language, the way he was looking at Officer Burbank, concerned me greatly when he started walking
At this
around.
point in time, do you know if he's got a firearm?
I don't.
Do you know if he's armed?
I don't.
And you said that how he was fixated on your partner caused you great concern. Why?
Because there's a way that, like I said, you get used to body language. You get used to studying people, and there's a way that people look at you when you're about to be in a fight.
Okay. And are you and Officer Burbank in a position to defend yourselves if Mr. Ellis has a firearm at that time?
No.
What are your options?
Well, I don't want to know if he had a firearm. It just is nothing but bad from there.
Okay. So you see him fixate on Officer Collins. When did he first become fixated on Officer Burbank?
Mm-hmm.
When did he first? So you say go to the curb. I assume he walks around the front part of the vehicle.
Yeah.
How far does he get before you notice that he's locked on to Officer Burbank?
Right to the hood. Right when he gets to the hood, he starts looking at him through the glass, and then he's like strangely close to the car as he comes around the side.
All right. And so what do you do at this point?
So at this point now it's changed again. Now I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm watching him, and there's a brief interchange where they kind of say something, and then all of a sudden he starts punching the window.
And so is there a reason you didn't pick up the mic and call him at that point?
I mean, in hindsight, knowing that he didn't have a gun and knowing the circumstances as I do now, I wish I did. I wish I had said 9-6 we're fighting one, because then there would have been cops there like that, and maybe it would have been a different outcome. But, you know, from my training experience, you know, when you get, so first of all, when somebody attacks you like that, you heard Sergeant Nielsen talk about controlled superiority. When someone initiates and you're sitting in a car or something like that, now they're in control. They've started this contact, they're dictating this contact, and so my first instinct is to take back control of that. And with my grappling experience, I mean, we do this all the time. I get people on the ground, get them in handcuffs, now we can talk. So my first thought is get him down, get him in handcuffs, figure out what's going on.
And so, what do you do when you see or hear, I guess you said you saw him punching the window or heard some exchange.
Yeah.
What do you do at that point?
I immediately get out and sprint around the car to contact him.
And tell the jury what happens as you get to the front of the vehicle.
Yeah, so as soon as I get to the front of the vehicle, he takes his focus off of Burbank and comes right at me and grabs me by my vest and picks me up and throws me backwards into the intersection.
All right. Ever experienced anything like that before?
Never.
We heard testimony about Officer Burbank using his door to strike Mr. Ellis. Did you even see that?
No.
Do you know when that occurred?
No.
Where was your focus at that point in time?
On Mr. Ellis.
So he grabs you and lifts you up into the intersection. What's going through your head?
You know, it was immediately when I felt that strength. So I think I was probably already taking the cues of when he came to the door and I saw his eyes and I saw the sweating. But when he picked me up and threw me, my mind replayed right back to those St. James apartments, and I knew we were dealing with someone in a similar state.
And so you land on, I assume you land on your back?
Yeah, I think I landed like on my back, my neck, and I rolled backwards and got right back up.
We saw some photographs during the state's case of some injuries to the back of your elbows. Did you sustain those injuries during that interaction?
I'm not sure. I mean, I assume so, but
Well, when you're grappling with Mr. Ellis, was there any point in time in which you would have been on your back and sustained those sorts of injuries from the pavement?
no.
All right, so he throws you into the intersection. Where are you relative to the police patrol vehicle at that point?
So when he throws me, I'm like basically right in front of the hood of the car.
Okay. And what do you hear or see next?
So the next moments are really, I mean, when I remember it, it's kind of like if you see like a GoPro camera like going downhill and it's just shaking. I mean, that's how. So I hit my back, I roll, I run up. He's kind of coming back at me, and I'm trying to close the distance and take him to the ground. So there was a lot of interchanges of me trying to drag him down to the ground, get a takedown on him, and he's just kind of swinging wildly and stuff's just flying.
Okay, you described it in your interview that the jury heard as a melee.
Yeah.
Are you getting punched, kicked? What's happening?
I mean, one of the benefits to grappling is when you close that distance and I get my head in tight, it's harder to hit people. But there was a couple times when he snuck through and did hit me, and I could feel him just flailing.
And as you engage in the manner you just indicated, are you able to see where Officer Burbank is while this is happening?
No.
Are you focused at all on where Officer Burbank is?
No.
Why?
You know, if he comes in the picture and I see him, then great. But I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what's happened there, and so that's not my. I have to treat this like I'm the only person there.
Well, you heard Officer Burbank's description, and they played his interview for the jury of multiple up and down situations with Mr. Ellis. Is that what you recall?
Yes, I do.
Okay. How long does that interchange? I'll strike that. At some point during the exchange, in your interview, you indicate that you're able to gain, I'll call it superiority position on his torso.
Yeah.
How long did this altercation go on before you were able to gain that position on Mr. Ellis?
I think we were at a couple minutes by then.
And tell us about we'll watch the video in a second, but I want you to tell us what happens as you're able to gain the superiority position on his torso.
Yeah, so that'd be like what you call a mount position. So I'm on top of him. He immediately is kind of coming up, trying to take me over backwards. So I'm elbowing him, trying to push him back down to the ground. Because again, I want to pin him, turn him, and start manipulating his arms to put him in handcuffs. So I'm elbowing, trying to drive him back down to the ground.
And what's the desired effect on an individual in Mr. Ellis's position when you're delivering those elbows? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, so I mean, ideally for me, is someone completely turns their back and faces the ground. That's kind of the natural reaction. I mean, if you get elbowed in the face, that's going to be number one. Or, like Sergeant Nielsen said, you kind of turtle. You turn on your side and you protect yourself. And as soon as you do that, you put yourself in a perfect place for me to put two hands on one of your arms and start the cuffing process.
So is that use of force intended to de-escalate the situation?
It is.
How so?
I mean, again, you've got to meet that force, stop it. We've got to move the cuffing somehow. So if somebody is swinging wildly at me and trying to push me backwards, for me just trying to catch one of his arms and put him in handcuffs, that's not a viable option. So I've got to regain the initiative of this. I've got to get him on the defense. And like I said, ideally, he flips around, faces the ground, and then maybe we can start ending this right now.
Okay. We're going to get through the rest of the altercation with Mr. Ellis, but you've seen Ms. McDowell's videos.
Yes.
In the first video we see, it appears to show you on Mr. Ellis's torso. Is that the period of time that you just described?
Yes.
All right. And so, was she able to capture the essence of the interaction between you and Mr. Ellis, or just catch the tail end of it?
No, I'm going to object. This is argument that lack of foundation.
Overall, give me an answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's right in the middle of it, maybe towards the end, but...
All right. Okay. So you described that, both in your statement, and I think just now, that as you're delivering those elbow strikes from that superiority position, Mr. Ellis doesn't do the things that you're hoping he does.
Right.
What does he do?
So instead, he just keeps swinging wildly, and he lunges up at me towards my face and basically is about to push me over.
Okay. And so what do you do in response to that?
So then the only thing I can do is kind of let him have his way. So I get up, and then now he kind of passes me, and now he's facing towards Ainsworth, essentially. And then that's when you see Mr. Cowden's video pick up, and I'm now behind him.
Okay. All right. So how much time are we talking about passing between when you're delivering the elbow strikes to where you end up in the perspective that Mr. Cowden was able to document?
I mean, in my mind, it was instantaneous, but I don't...
Okay.
It seemed right away.
Okay. All right. So explain what is going through your mind as you end up in the position that you just described. What's the next option for you?
So right away, as soon as I'm starting to elbow and he kind of comes up through me, right away I'm thinking, I got it, LVNR. We got to put this guy out so we can get him in handcuffs. And so that's immediately what once I start doing. So he's kind of passing me. I'm going to put him in the LVNR. And it's at that point, like I say in my statement, now I see Officer Burbank back in the picture, and he has his taser out, and I can see the red lights right on me.
Okay. You just indicated that you said that in your statement. When did you make your statement relative to this incident?
When?
Yeah.
Was it on the 6th? Or I think it was on the 6th. It was a few days after.
Is that standard?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time you made that statement, did you know there was any video that documented exactly what you did?
No.
Did you have an expectation that there might be video documenting the entirety of your interaction, given that this occurred in a residential neighborhood?
Oh, yeah, on a well-lit street like that, and everyone's got cameras in Tacoma. I assumed it was.
Okay. But you didn't know at that point in time that there was video?
No.
All right. So, you indicated that you, in your mind, went to the Rolodex of application of the LVNR.
Mm-hmm.
Describe your attempts to apply that and why it was unsuccessful.
So, so I started to apply the LVNR, and then we start to come to the ground. But when I see Officer Burbank, and Manny and I go to the ground, he's now in a position where, and I can walk you through the video and show you, but if you picture a person, so Manny's kind of laying on his side facing you guys, and I kind of land on top of him like this, so our shoulders are perpendicular to each other, and we need them parallel for me to do that. So now I'm kind of on his side, but once I saw Burbank with that taser, I knew that was the more effective option, and so I was going to just hold him until that taser took effect.
All right, and so if I understand, you're behind Mr. Ellis. Where is Officer Burbank relative to you when you see the taser?
So he's in front of us. You got the car, you've got me and Manny on the ground, and then Burbank is standing up facing us with his taser out.
All right, we're probably going to take our morning break here in a second, but before we do, was your position relative to Mr. Ellis before you saw Officer Burbank with the taser conducive to application of the LVNR?
I could have made it work, yes,
Okay. And why did you stop?
because I saw Officer Burbank with the taser.
Okay. I think we're going to take our morning recess, but would it be beneficial to demonstrate for the jury how to appropriately apply the LVNR and why you didn't do it afterwards?
Sure.
Okay. So this is a good time to break.
Okay. We'll take our morning recess, ladies and gentlemen, for 15 minutes. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves with anyone else, and do not permit anyone to discuss the case with you or in your presence. back, everybody. Please be seated. You may resume when you're ready, Mr. Osser.
Before we get to kind of a demonstration on the application of the LVNR and the application of this circumstance, do you remember last week when Ms. Nicolava was asking Sergeant Nielsen about probable cause to arrest based on the video, the level of offenses? Do you remember her asking those questions?
I do.
Did you have probable cause to arrest for more than misdemeanors at the time you contacted Mr. Ellis?
Oh, yes.
Tell the jury what offenses you had probable cause to arrest Mr. Ellis for.
So from the moment he started striking the window to try and break it, that's felony assault on a police officer. And then when I ran around to apprehend him and he threw me, that's a second count of a felony assault on a police officer.
And what's your level of concern once Mr. Ellis is able to throw you into the intersection?
I mean, I was very concerned.
For what?
Well, first of all, if someone's able to, we struggle with strong people all the time, big guys. I've wrestled with big, strong guys. There's a difference when someone lifts you up like a child and throws you. And, the real concern in these situations comes in, and it's sometimes hard for non-police officers to grasp, is, I mentioned in my statement how people usually, quote unquote, fight the police because they don't want to get arrested. So you catch someone doing something wrong, they don't want to get arrested, and they do just enough resistance to create space, and then they run. That's normally what we see. But when somebody's aggressing on you over and over again, we have to assume the worst, that they're trying to kill us. And the bottom line is, especially for us, even if there's plenty of instances, there was an officer in King County killed by a naked man in an intersection.
Overall, you may continue.
So, just for one, not to mention the knives and the other weapons on our kit, our firearms, you heard Ms. Bremner allude to the Glock pistols. There's no external safety on a Glock. So there's no switch you have to find. There's nothing that you have to know. If you grab my Glock, you can shoot it. It is a 5-pound trigger pull away from that trigger going off. So as soon as we have a saying, it's my gun until someone starts reaching it and we're both grabbing it, now it's our gun. So then it's just who has it, right? So once someone starts aggressing on us like this, these are the things that have to go through our heads, and we have to immediately restrain that person like yesterday, because it's very dangerous.
All right. Now, you had discussed the application of the LVNR and positioning. Would it help explain to the jury what you were trying to do and how it's applied by demonstrating?
Sure.
Right. And with the court's permission, I'd ask that the court allow Mr. Arbenz to come up, because I don't want to, and allow Officer Collins to demonstrate and explain to the jury what he's trying to do and the positioning of the body necessary to do it.
Any objection?
Before the court, what we would object.
Well, that's sort of a foot on each side of the line.
Well, being practical, Your Honor.
Okay. Proceed.
Okay, yeah, so the LVNR, again, so you have your two carotid arteries that run on either side, and they're pumping oxygenated blood up to your head. So for me to do it correctly, I need to be facing the same direction as the person. If I'm on the side, I'm only getting one side of someone, and I can't include the other side. But from the back, your elbow is in line, if you're sitting in a chair. The elbow is in line, and then you go around, I'm blocking both sides, and then I grab my bicep, and then the other hand will go behind the head, and I'll squeeze down and forward, and you just temporarily stop that, and then they'll go out, put them in cuffs, and then the blood starts pumping again, and you go right back to it.
And Officer Collins, in order for it to be effective, how long do you have to apply it in that position you just demonstrated?
I think it varies, but at least, 5-6 seconds.
Okay. And in the video, we're going to watch the video in a minute, it doesn't appear as though your left arm ever gets to the back of Mr. Ellis's head. Were you able to get into a position to apply it that you just demonstrated?
No.
Why?
I mean, I relinquished the position when I saw Officer Burbank, but kind of how we fell, you know, we're both falling, and I'm behind him, and I'm getting it. Now I see the taser. Now when we hit the ground, I immediately am kind of on his side. So again, I'm in this kind of orientation to him. When he's facing the video at the time, and I'm on top of him here. So from here, I can't get to here. So I'd have to start working, which I could have done. But again, I saw that taser.
Let me ask you this. You heard a couple of experts for the state, including Mr. Ryan, indicate that you had your hand on the front of Mr. Ellis's throat, choking him. Did that ever occur?
That's ridiculous.
Okay. Would that be an effective control technique in the situation that we saw?
No, that's amateur stuff from people who are just showing aggression and are just trying to hurt somebody. But first of all, you'd see the marks right away because we're very tender here. You damage the stuff around people's neck very easily. So you would see that right away, number one, and it's completely ineffective, number two.
All right. Go ahead. Thanks. All right. So when we left off, let's get situated. So before we broke, you were telling us describing for us what you saw when Officer Burbank displayed the taser.
Yes.
Okay. So at that point, are you behind Mr. Ellis?
Yeah, so I'm behind him, dragging him to the ground as I see that.
Okay. And was that the first time you recall seeing Officer Burbank during this altercation?
It is.
And so what was your response to seeing the taser? What effect did that have on what you were doing to Mr. Ellis?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to get... So they have little barbs, as you probably heard a few times by now, but there's little barbs that shoot out of them, and I didn't want to get shot in the face. So at that point, I'm holding, and I'm kind of trying to shield myself.
Okay. And are you still in contact with Mr. Ellis when the taser application makes contact?
Yes.
Can you feel it?
You can feel... What I felt was that you feel lock up, like you feel the muscles get really tight and stiff. That's how it kind of manifests.
All right, so tell the jury what happened after you felt that first taser application.
Yeah, so again, you can see it on the video, but I'm holding him, and once I feel that taser stop his active resistance, I immediately transfer to his left arm. Now I'm just controlling his left arm. So now it's going to be Burbank's job to control the right arm, my job on the left arm.
All right, we'll watch the video in a second, but in the video it appears as though you're kind of cradling his head. Why are you doing that?
I'd have to watch the video to see exactly what you're talking about, but yeah, I'm not quite sure where.
What's the desired effect of the taser?
Well, you get lock up, and then the subject goes limp.
Okay, and so did you feel lock up initially?
I did.
Did you feel Mr. Ellis go limp?
I did.
And so when he went limp, tell us what you did and why you did it.
Yeah, so I immediately started putting him into a cuffing position. So I think I know what you're talking about the cradling his head. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, probably just to keep his head from slamming on the cement. But I have one hand on his head, and I roll his body so he's face down so I can start moving to a cuffing position. Because we can't cuff him like this. I need him like this so I can start working his hands.
All right, and so were you able to get him in the prone, I'll call it the prone position on his stomach?
Yes.
So tell us what you did once you were able to get him into that position.
So as soon as I got him in the prone, I moved into our non-compliant cuffing position. There's two main ones, but the one where my knee and shin goes across the shoulder, kind of at a 45 towards the person's spine.
And were you able to get your knee into that location?
Yes, momentarily.
What happened once you got into that location?
Well, you can see from the video, and I didn't recall him saying, try it again, but when he starts fighting, now we're in a dynamic situation, and I'm trying to keep my knee there, but I'm also just trying to keep him to the ground, but obviously it's hard if somebody's flailing and bucking.
Well, you heard Grant Fredericks testify that you put your knee on the back of his head. Did you ever do that?
No.
In fact, in the video, can you see Mr. Ellis's sweatshirt sticking out from underneath your knee?
Yes.
And did he have a design on the back of that sweatshirt?
I didn't realize it until they showed the clothes until the state showed the clothes in court, but he had almost like a Native American kind of totem pole symbol on his back that was white, And in the video, you can see the white of that design with my knee on his back.
So you had indicated that you didn't hear him say try it again, but that he became combative at that point.
Yes.
So what happened after he, I guess the taser wears off at that point? What happens?
So from there, you know, it's hard to describe play by play what happened, but essentially from there, we had him in a good spot where I mainly had control of that left arm. Burbank had control of that right arm. And from that point, it was kind of just a process of slowly, you know, because that's exactly what we want. We want to get you to the ground. We want to get you face down, prone. Then we want to start working those arms, and we were there. And so then it's just a matter of time till we get the handcuffs on.
All right. And was he still resistant in the application of the handcuffs?
Oh, yeah.
Describe what he was doing and how he was resisting.
I mean, he was trying to stand up the whole time. He was trying to rip his arms apart. He was kind of kicking and spinning both directions, as you can see on the video.
Can you let him stand up in that situation?
Oh, no.
Why not?
Well, again, you know, so it starts back of where I'm on top and I'm throwing elbows. Then he pushes through me and stands up. So now we've been through a few different interactions of him aggressing on police officers. And now he's coming right at where Burbank is. If he gets away from me before I drag him down, he's going right back at Officer Burbank. So, again, we're now progressing down the line. It's getting more and more serious. As these things go, we don't have the option to just say, okay, we're done. Have a nice night. This guy has to go. He's a danger to the public. He's a danger to himself and to us, right? So he has to go in cuffs. We could be progressing towards a lethal situation at this point where we're using firearm.
Okay. And so after that first taser application, it sounds like you were not able to apply the handcuffs.
No.
Were there other taser applications, if you recall?
Just from the video, seeing it here in court, I can see that you can see where it times, and he's giving him more rides with the taser.
But as you sit here now, or before you saw that, did you have any sort of independent recollection about how many taser applications were necessary?
No.
All right. You described a little bit about the process prior to getting the cuffs applied to Mr. Ellis. How long did that take? Once you were in the position that you just described.
I mean, maybe another 2 minutes or so.
Eventually, were you able to get the cuffs applied?
Yes.
And was that after, well, I guess you don't know, the third taser application?
Could be.
Okay. Once you got the cuffs applied, tell us what happened.
So then as soon as we got the cuffs applied, he started scooting his knees up underneath himself and trying to stand up.
And we saw some, I'll call it road rash marks on his legs,
Mhm.
photographs. Is that consistent with what you're describing?
I suppose.
All right, and so if you have the cuffs applied and he's on, I assume still on the stomach,
Yes.
where are you situated?
So as soon as the cuffs are applied and he's trying to stand up, I then go move to his legs so that he can't stand up. So I immediately start grabbing his legs, and what I'm trying to do is crisscross them. So if you put someone's foot in the crook of their knee, then I only have to fight one leg, and I can put all my weight on that leg, and then that will keep you from getting your feet underneath yourself to stand up.
Was that a factor?
I mean, he didn't stand up.
Okay. Was he still attempting to get away from you?
He was, yeah.
We heard Sergeant Nielsen talking about observing, I guess, your proficiency in grappling in the video. Did you use your body to try to keep and restrain and hold Mr. Ellis in a position so a backup could get there?
Absolutely, yeah.
So he described putting your legs around his legs. What's the point of that? Or around his hips?
Yeah, I mean, again, so the grappling is all about your hips, and so it's just a way to immobilize. You throw that over, then people can't explode and buck with their hips, so it's just another way of control.
Okay. And at least the portions of the video we've seen, the only strikes thrown were at that first McDowell video. Did you throw any strikes at Mr. Ellis after what we saw in the video?
No,
Why not?
it wasn't necessary.
All right. Did Officer Burbank deliver any strikes after what we saw in that first McDowell video?
No, not that I know of.
All right. So you got a leg in his crook of his knee.
Hmm.
Where's Officer Burbank?
So he had the handcuffs on, and so Officer Burbank was basically kind of straddling his hips, because you got to imagine anatomically someone with their hands behind their back, you're not going to sit on their hands or over their hands, you sit behind them. So that kind of places you on the hips of somebody.
When your statement that the jury heard, I think you said he's sitting on him or something along those lines. What do you mean by that?
I mean, that was a poor choice of words. I thought that, at the time, you got to understand, when we were getting interviewed, I didn't think in my wildest nightmares that the state would come after us for wrongdoing in this. I thought we were explaining a terrible, tragic situation that happened. And so I would have been very precise in my wording. But if you just think rationally, anatomically about that, there's no, I mean, he's sitting behind his hands. He has to be, because he also says he's pressing his hands together because he's seen people break handcuffs. So in order to press his hands together, he's got to be behind, lower than the hands.
So when you say behind, like if I have my hands behind my back, are you saying like on the buttocks portion?
Correct. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right. Could you squeeze the hands in the manner that you described if you're sitting on his, I guess, the upper torso?
No, and that would just be ridiculous. I mean, someone easily buck and then you're right off.
Okay.
You have no leverage from that position.
All right. So with Officer Burbank sitting in the lower torso, and you got, it sounded like one leg of Mr. Ellis?
It depends on what time you're talking about, because he was constantly kind of kicking and flailing, but I just kept working to that position where, again, I'm trying to cross his leg, put it in the crook, and then put his other leg over and place all my weight down on that leg that's on top.
Okay. At some point, are you running out of gas?
Oh, yeah.
Where in this sequence?
It's hard to say. You get so focused in a fight of that seriousness and magnitude, and I don't remember thinking that at all, but as soon as we were relieved by Ford and Rankin and Sergeant Lim, I remember getting up and like my hands started to kind of curl. If you grip a lot like that, the fatigue will cause your hands to curl up, and you kind of feel the lactic acid in your forearm. So that was the first time I was like, man.
Okay. Well, let's talk about before those guys get there. How long are you in that position that you just described, with Officer Burbank on his buttocks area and you on the leg, before Rankin and Ford get there? Because they're the first ones that get there, right?
Yeah, I think it was fairly quick.
Okay.
I think it was very quick.
Okay, so tell us what happened once they get there.
So Ford and Rankin show up, and again, so my positioning now, I'm looking straight down at the street. So I have his leg, and I'm looking straight down. All my focus is keeping him down. So I'm not sure who was doing what, but I know that they basically replaced us. And then I remember hearing Sergeant Lim there, and then we were off.
Okay. Before you got off, did you ask for hobbles?
Yes.
First off, why do you ask for hobbles?
Yeah, so again, if you handcuff somebody, so first of all, especially someone in this state, if someone's under a high amount of narcotics and they're not thinking straight, they're not making rational decisions, if you put them at a position of disadvantage with their hands behind their back, that is very, very dangerous. So in the academy, we have to watch a video of this controlled superiority, and in the video, it's in San Diego, cops lose control of a suspect with his hands behind his back, runs across the freeway, and gets killed by an automobile. Not only that, but if he goes up, we have to keep him down. So if he goes up, then I have to take him back down. Now with his hands behind his back, now he can break something in his face. He could brain damage, who knows? But it's not good, because you're coming from a high position coming down with no way to protect yourself.
Well, we heard the state expert, Jack Ryan, say you just turn him over on the side and lay on his feet. Is that a practical application?
No, it's not.
Why not?
I mean, it'd be great if he just laid there, but the whole point of the story is that he wasn't complying. And if he was on his side, you have to have something to stop the movement against, right? So when they're prone, now I can put pressure down against an unmovable object, the street, to stop it from moving. But if it doesn't have something to stop it, then we're just back to square one of fighting his legs.
Okay. So we heard Officer Ford testify that he grabbed one leg and you had the other. Do you remember that?
I don't remember specifically. I know he at some point came to help me, because I remember when I looked and got up, Ford was there.
Do you remember making the request for hobbles?
I do.
Okay. And how long did it take for, once you requested the hobbles, for someone to produce them?
I don't know. It seemed like maybe 20, 30 seconds, something like that. I don't. I know now from testimony that it was Officer Burbank, but I didn't know at the time.
No independent recollection of that. All right, did you see them get applied?
I kind of. I mean, because I'm facing down, and I saw the loop go over the feet, and then to so yes, I did. I did see them.
Okay.
Yeah,
What did you do once they were applied?
I was off, and I stood up at that point, and then there was so many other officers there. There was at least 3 sergeants on scene right there, and so we just kind of, police work is a team event always. There's almost nothing we do from start to finish. In fact, as a 2-officer car, Officer Burbank and I, they put us 2-officer because we kind of handle the most dangerous situations. And as soon as you do, it was very regular. When you arrest somebody, we hand them off to other people as soon as they're in handcuffs. They take them to jail. They take them to the hospital to get treated, whatever. But, we were relieved. Sergeant Lim wanted to talk to us and just said, what happened? Because nobody knew at that point what went on.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. So in Mr. Liu's opening, he said that you choked Mr. Ellis unconscious 3 times. Did that ever happen?
No.
You said that you looked up and there were several officers there. Was Sergeant Lim there when the hobbles were applied, or when you stood up?
I believe he was, yes.
Who is Sergeant Lim to you?
He was my supervisor.
What does that mean?
He's in control of our squad of officers. He was the one who was our next up in the chain of command.
And so once he's on scene, is he now in charge of the scene, or are you still in charge of the scene?
He's in charge of the scene.
And once you relieve Mr. Ellis to other officers, who's responsible for Mr. Ellis?
Well, I mean, every officer is responsible who's directly in contact with him.
Okay, but if you're not in contact, are you still responsible for him?
No.
Was it your understanding that Sergeant Lim was now responsible for the scene and other officers responsible for it?
I'm going to object to the communicating nature.
Okay.
Who was in charge of the scene once you were off?
Well, definitely one of the 3 sergeants who was there.
And who was in charge of Mr. Ellis once you were off?
Whoever was in contact with him.
Did you have the authority to go intervene with Sergeant Lim?
No.
Once you stood up, where did you go?
So originally I just walked back towards the car, in the front of the car, and that's where Sergeant Lim eventually interviewed us and kind of was just like, what happened, guys? Give me a rundown.
Well, let me slow you down real quick. You said the car. What car are you talking about?
Our car, our vehicle.
So the patrol car that's at the stop bar at the intersection?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go back to that in a second. You heard Ms. McDowell and Mr. Cowden say that you, I guess, attacked Mr. Ellis as he was walking down the sidewalk. Did that happen?
Absolutely not.
If you were going to contact somebody walking down the sidewalk, would you leave your car at the stop bar at the middle of the intersection?
No.
Why not?
Again, I mean, it just doesn't. You're obstructing traffic. It doesn't make any sense. If you're going to contact someone, you pull off the road.
Okay. All right. All right. You said that Sergeant Lim contacts you at the front of the patrol vehicle. Is there a discussion about what led to the interaction between you and Mr. Ellis?
Yes.
Was Mr. Ellis still alive at the time?
Yes.
Did you have any reason to think Mr. Ellis was going to die?
No.
Did you tell him what happened?
Yes.
Did you tell him that Mr. Ellis attacked the patrol vehicle
Yes.
and that he threw you?
Yes.
Again, I'm going to object to the nature, to the leading nature.
Good question.
Understood, Judge. Did you provide a description of Mr. Ellis's contact with you?
I did.
After having that discussion with Sergeant Lim, what happened next?
So Sergeant Lim, I'm not sure what Sergeant Lim did, but I eventually went to the back of our patrol car, and I was waiting for fire to show up so I could give them a rundown of what we were dealing with.
Okay. And how long did you think you were in that position?
Minutes, I'm not sure how long. I mean, I was kind of collecting myself and trying to figure out what in the world just happened, so.
Where was Officer Burbank at the time?
I only know from being here and hearing his statement that he eventually went back and got his magazines and I think his hat, but I'm not sure specifically.
Okay, at some point, did one of you go back into the patrol vehicle?
Yeah, so I don't know when Burbank did, but I know that at some point once fire was there, Sergeant Lim contacted us and was like, "Hey guys, I don't know, why don't you guys sit in your car? It's looking pretty serious now."
Meaning they may have to treat this as a officer use of force case.
Exactly.
Is there a procedure in place when there is an officer involved use of force with a subject?
Yes.
All right. And was that followed once Mr. Ellis passed?
Yes.
Okay. I think you indicated that you contacted fire. Tell us how you contacted fire.
So they always park a little bit a ways from the scene and then walk in. They have to double make sure that everything's safe because they have no way to protect themselves. So I kind of they parked, a ways back from my car, and I just approached them. And Lieutenant Wilson, who testified, I don't think he was a lieutenant at the time, but he was the first one out of the vehicle, and he was moving up to the scene. And so I just kind of gave him a rundown as best I could.
And why did you indicate to him that you thought that Mr. Ellis might be suffering from excited delirium?
Because it's a serious condition, and we know that sudden death is part of one of the symptomology pieces to that.
Okay. I assume you didn't call for medical aid.
No,
Why not?
because I heard Sergeant Lim call it.
When did you hear Sergeant Lim calling for medical aid?
It seemed immediately as soon as hobbles were on, but I think from the timeline that the state provided, it looked like 12 seconds from the time he was detained.
Okay. And when you say, what are you talking about with the timeline the state provided? Are you talking about exhibits that were admitted during the course of the trial?
Yeah, there was an exhibit that there was just a white sheet that showed arrival times of officers and yeah.
And so is it your recollection that that brief period is when he contacted aid?
Yeah, because it was immediately when I stood up.
And if he contacted aid, do you have to then contact aid yourself?
No, that wouldn't make any sense.
Why not?
It's just redundant. I mean, they make the call to fire, and fire is very busy and has a lot to do, and so they're going to respond when they can respond. It doesn't matter how many times we ask them to.
Once you were relieved from Mr. Ellis, did you have any other contact with Mr. Ellis?
No,
I mean, physical contact, I guess.
no.
There's some information that Officer Farinas applied a spit sock. Did you have anything to do with that?
No, I did not.
Were you present when that occurred?
I heard him spitting, and I heard officers talking about it, but I wasn't present when it was. I'm not even sure, other than you saying and testimony saying it was Farinas, but I didn't see who applied it.
Okay. Once Mr. Ellis was hobbled and handcuffed, did you apply any downward pressure on his torso?
No.
You had an opportunity, Officer Collins, to observe the video evidence during the course of the trial, right?
Yes, sir.
In the video, at least the Biden video, we can hear Mr. Ellis saying he can't breathe, I think twice. Did you hear that on the video?
On the video, I did.
Did you hear it that night?
No.
How could you not hear it that night if we can hear it on the Biden video?
Yeah, in extreme stress situations like that, you have what's called auditory exclusion. So a lot of times, I didn't even report that I said put your hands behind your back or that Sarah McDowell was yelling at us. I didn't hear her yelling at us. So I get very focused in those situations, and I was focused on his hands, and I was focusing on getting him in handcuffs, and I didn't hear any of that.
In your statement that you gave a couple days later, you also didn't indicate that you heard Mr. Ellis say try it again. Did you hear that?
I did not.
On, at least in Mr. Liu's opening, he indicated that one of the officers said, shut the fuck up. Do you remember that happening?
I remember investigators asked me about that, and it was unclear as where in the timeline that happened. And I told them if it happened when only Burbank and I were there, then it was me, because I've never heard Burbank cuss on a call. He's like the most professional officer in Tacoma PD. So I said if we were the only ones there, then it was me. But I don't have an independent recollection of saying that.
Okay. So just so I understand, you don't remember saying that?
No, I don't.
But if one of the two of you did, it would have been you?
Yep.
you know if any other officers were present when that was said?
I don't know.
With the court's permission, I'm going to ask that we publish Exhibit 20, which was Ms. McDowell's first video. And I'd ask that Officer Collins be permitted to move around to the monitor to explain what we're seeing.
That's fine.
Okay, Judge, you have a point?
It's actually 20B, right? Is it 20?
20 is the first video.
I'm sorry. You're right. Proceed.
Let me ask you this before they pull it up. All right, can you orient yourself to this? Can you show us which officers you look at the video?
So I'm the one with my back to you here, and you can't see Burbank, but he's on the other side of us.
Let me ask you this, Officer Collins. When you made your statement on the 9th of March, did you know this existed?
No.
Did you notice it would show the part of the altercation between you and Mr. Ellis?
No.
What I think I want Sean to do is hit play. I want you to watch it, then I'm going to ask you a couple questions, okay? All right, can you just hit play?
Hey! Stop! Oh my God! Stop hitting him! Hitting him! Just arrest him! Just arrest him! Oh my God! That looks so scary! Shut up! You have kids in the car, you dumbass! You already know. Shut the.
All right, so that was the total footage captured on that, at least the first clip between the officers and Mr. Ellis. Is that right?
From what I know.
Okay. What do we see happening in that clip?
So in the beginning, you can see, and Officer Burbank describes it perfectly in his statement, but it looks like, so he's being kind of chased into the intersection, and then there's some sort of fast interaction that's happening between him and Mr. Ellis. You can't tell what. And then they both go to the ground, Burbank to the front of the car, and Mr. Ellis towards the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. And then I get in the mount position on top of him.
All right, and so when you were testifying earlier this morning, you indicated that in that mount position you delivered several elbows to Mr. Ellis?
Correct.
Is that what we see in that video?
Yep.
Okay. Aside from those elbow strikes, did you ever strike Mr. Ellis?
I think not once.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Not once.
Can we have 21, please? And when they're pulling that up, Officer Collins, 21 is the video, the second. And actually, before we get there, Officer Collins, do you see items in the roadway, both here and here? I'm looking at right in front of the dumpsters there.
I do.
Do you know what those are?
It looks like that plastic grocery bag, and then that's the bottle of water there.
Were those the items that Mr. Ellis had in his hands when you first walked up to the vehicle?
So what I recollect was the bag. I didn't specifically see one thing or the other.
Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is have Sean hit play again. I want you to watch it, and I'm going to ask you about what we see.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Behind your back.
You can get it again. Put your hands behind your back. Hands behind your back. Put your hands behind.
All right. Which of those officers were you relative to Mr. Ellis?
So, I was the one towards me.
Behind him?
Behind him, yeah.
How did you get in that location?
I mean, somewhere in the struggle there of trying to get him in cuffs, he must have turned on his side. I don't know specifically.
I'm sorry, must have turned.
He must have turned on his side. I don't know specifically how I got to there, but somewhere in that.
That was a bad question. I meant from the first video that we saw, Exhibit 20, where you're on top of him, to the, 12 seconds later that we see that perspective. How did the three of you end up in that location?
Yeah, so I'm on him delivering elbow strikes. And he lunges up at my face and starts to stand up. So I let him go, and I went around behind him, and I start to put on an LVNR, and then we fall to the ground. Now we're facing like a southwestern direction, kind of towards Hosmer and Ainsworth. And so I'm kind of laying on his side. Then Burbank is applying the taser, and then by that point, I think I've already moved to his hand. I'm controlling his hand, what you saw in the end of the Cowden video.
We'll get there in a second.
Right? So I'm controlling his hand. Burbank controls his other hand, but somewhere he started struggling again, and now we're kind of back to he's on his side, I'm behind him, and Burbank's in front of him.
All right.
I didn't hear that.
I'm sorry.
I
He's on his side, I'm behind him, and Burbank is in front of him.
So what we saw right before this clip ended, it appeared as though you had one knee on the ground. Is that what you recall?
Yeah, that's what it looks like, yeah.
Where's your other knee? Do you know?
I think it was standing up. I might have been on my foot, or it was on the ground on the other side of him.
And is Mr. Ellis complying with your repeated request to put his hands behind his back?
No, I don't remember saying that, but it doesn't appear so, because otherwise I would just put him in handcuffs.
Well, is that your voice that we hear saying?
That's my voice, yeah.
And if we could rewind it just a little bit. What does it play one more time, please? Can you see your knee on the ground?
I do.
Can you point it out to the jury? And you said your other knee might be up. What makes you believe that?
But you can see right here from the angle, do you see my foot? Like this.
And can you show us where Mr. Ellis's head is?
Looks like that's the top of his head right there.
And which way is his head facing?
Westbound.
And you had indicated to us that you were trying to gain control of an arm. Can you see that in the video?
I mean, not necessarily. It's pretty dark, but that's the only thing to be doing in this situation. I mean, we're trying to handcuff him. So.
All right. Can you show us where Officer Burbank is relative to you in the video?
So that's his foot. So he's got one leg up like this, and that's his hand right there. Looks like the taser's still in it.
And can you see the red light from the taser on the cement?
Yep, right there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You can go ahead and sit down. Or no, wait. I'm almost done. We get 546. And as we're orienting 546 is a portion of the synchronized timeline that Grant Fredericks created for this case. You remember seeing that during the course of the trial?
I do.
All right. And I think Mr. Fredericks' testimony was that this started playing 112 seconds after your clear appears in the CAD report that's Plaintiff's Exhibit 13. Okay. So when Ms. Smith hits play, I want you to listen to what's happening, and then I'll have her pause that, okay?
Yeah.
All right. Can you hear the struggle between you and Mr. Ellis as this starts recording?
Yes.
How long do you think you were struggling with Mr. Ellis before this part, if you know?
I mean, judging by where her video picks up, probably a couple minutes.
Okay. Is that consistent with what Ms. Mullane testified hearing for about... No.
Argumentative.
Well, it's not argumentative, but it is leading.
I'll rephrase. You heard Ms. Mullane talk about a 1 minute and 15 to 2 minute time period where she heard struggling outside. Would that have been this time period that we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
There's lack of foundation.
Overruled, you may answer.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. Let's see if we can play it again. What we're going to see is Mr. Cowden's video on the middle here.
Okay.
I want you to watch that, watch the interaction, and I'm going to ask you questions about that.
Okay.
731, go ahead.
Oh my God, that was so scary! Hey, you're on the wrong way! You got kids in the park, you dumbass, you already know.
7. I'm not 6 majors. Alright, traffic 7317 on trouble 968, order 2622.
if he killed him. Try again. Go around the
Go ahead and pause it right there. Thank you. You see Ms. McDowell's vehicle now going past Mr. Cowden's vehicle?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Does that appear to line up with what we just saw in the previous exhibit from her camera?
Yes.
You've heard it described by some state's experts that Mr. Ellis might be exhibiting air hunger during that interaction. Is that what you experienced?
I've never heard that term until this trial, but again, I mean, he's not exhibiting someone who's not able to breathe, he's fighting us. So we can deal with the air thing after we get him in the handcuffs. And until we do that, we're still in the same spot.
Okay. Go ahead and have a seat. If you had heard Mr. Ellis say, "I can't breathe," would it have changed what you were obligated to do in detaining and restraining him?
No.
How come?
Well, because again, we have to put you in handcuffs first so that you can't hurt yourself, anyone in the public, or us. So we have to get you in handcuffs, and then we can deal with medical issues after that.
Did you hear the sounds that Mr. Ellis was making in each of those videos?
I did.
Did you hear him making those sounds the night this occurred?
I can remember a couple times, like when he lunged up at my face, he was making similar sounds.
Okay. Was he speaking to you at that point in time?
I don't remember hearing any words.
All right. Let me ask you this. Did you and Officer Burbank attack Mr. Ellis?
No.
Were your actions responsive to his, or was he responsive to you?
We're responsive to him.
Was there anything else that you think you could have done with a lesser degree of force to restrain and control Mr. Ellis?
No.
That's all I have.
We got 5 minutes. Do you want to say, I've got a meeting actually that I've got to go to, so and it might be best to let you start at 1:30 anyway, rather than break it up. So we'll recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not discuss case among yourselves or with anyone else, and of course avoid any reports on the media or elsewhere in the subject of this trial. Thank you.